Hello, my name is Justin Will. Today I'm going to talk to you a bit about reporting. Alright, the first thing we're going to talk about today is the sample database. I've attached the sample database that we're going to be working with today is actually a derivative of the Northwinds database published by Microsoft. This database comes with both SQL Server and Access as kind of a default test database that they use for playing around in their systems. And I thought, hey, what a great place to start for building a quick database for our samples today. The first thing I'm going to point out is if you're interested in how to do something like that, you can jump back and see the create DB. And what this does is actually uses a SQL script to generate the tables, and here I'll show you what that looks like. So this is just a SQL script being run by native 4D commands in version 18 here to create the tables, and then we actually connect via ODBC to a database here and bring in the data for the database. And once that's all done, I went through and connected the tables up with relations and set their primary keys and so forth, just to kind of complete the database to give us a little bit of a test database to work with. So that's going to be the base for our discussion today. Let's jump back. The other thing we did is I wanted to have a website attached to the database, so I downloaded a web framework, a template based off a free Bootstrap template that can be found right on the web at, let me pull that up for you. I'll show you. It's just a Git, or I think it's a Git. Okay, so right here, just a download of a package of web templates, and then I attached it and hooked it up to some framework code that we already had in existence that we've been using through a handful of systems internally. And as a result of that, you end up with a database that looks like this, that's connected to some actual 4D tables. Our Northwinds tables. If you want to look at the code behind this, there's actually a lot of really good code in the framework. Let me show you just a couple tidbits that are interesting about that. If you wanted to pick that apart at some point, you can start looking at probably the place most interesting here is the _ web output setup. And you'll see right here I create categories. Categories link directly to essentially, if you look at this navigation here, a category is website, and next category is employees, shipping, and reports. So those are my website, employees, shipping, and reports. And then under the categories of like website, I want customers, a table to a pointer table, a table pointer to the customers table with a couple of columns that I use for the output, so you can see customer ID, customer name, and when I pull that up over here going tables customers, you can see customer ID, customer name, and all the code behind this is all embedded in the database here in the sample database. But I can do searches in here for like Alfred or whatnot. So double click and get into an actual record and save and whatnot. So just a couple of goodies there if you wanted to dig into that and play with that a little bit. There's a lot of good code in here that we've taken from some of our internal systems. One other thing here is this is actually the Font Awesome, if you're familiar with that, is a free font that is used for images in websites. So when it downloads the entire font library, and you just essentially are naming a character to some extent that is an image in the font set. And it's a trick that's used in the web world to make thin, fast downloads and make icons out of it, so it's only one download for a whole plethora of little icons, and they're fully scalable then, like a font would be. So these are just references to the actual Font Awesome icons that then get used through like these little areas here. Alright, so just wanted to point out a little bit of framework things before we jump into the main topic today, which is going to be reporting. When we talk about web reporting, there's really a couple of ways that you can deliver reports to a user. One of them is through HTML, CSS, where you carefully build a web page that is printable and deliver that to your user. The other way you can go about doing reporting is through file delivery. So let's say you build a PDF or a Word document or an Excel file, or fill in the blank with whatever file formats you like to use, RTF, whatever, and then deliver your reports that way to the user. HTML CSS is not my favorite way to do that. I tend to avoid that as much as possible because browsers can render pages differently from Safari to Firefox to Chrome to Internet Explorer to Edge. You get slightly different results from browser to browser and user machine to machine because you don't have full control of it. The other thing is different browsers handle the things like margins and little extra things that get printed on the page differently from browser to browser. And as a result of that, we developers lose control of what the final output looks like. Let's talk about Firefox, for instance. If you look at this as a print settings, for Firefox, you'll notice that the margins are changeable by the end user, and also they can decide where they want the page title to display, if they want the URL printed, page numbers, dates and times of the printing, is all under the user's control and not under your control as a developer. And again, this changes slightly from browser to browser, but you can see that just having margins change, we all know, can greatly affect what our output looks like. If it squeezes in too much or stretches, it's obviously can wreak havoc on our reports. Excuse me. The second thing, the way I tend to like to do reporting for web users is through a file download. Using a file download, we're essentially going to use like a PDF format where everything is carefully laid out into a rendered solution, a rendered file that's printable then by the user. And the other really nice thing I like about file download is that all reports are emailable. Versus HTML reports, which they'd have to then print them to a PDF or something, whereas if you're delivering it as a PDF, it's kind of ready to go. We really have found in our reporting solution for one of our web products that two file formats pretty much solve every reporting need we have. We found them to be PDFs and Excel files. We're delivering, like it says here, approximately 750,000 reports a year using these two methods, and rarely do we ever get complaints that the formats are not what people are looking for. I mean, they can use, everyone can open PDFs for the most part, and even Excel files. If you don't own Excel, people can open them with Numbers on a Mac or OpenOffice or Google Sheets will open them now. So they're pretty universal using these two file formats. So I don't know that we've run into a problem where people were struggling to open one of these file formats. Again, kind of the goods and bads of going with PDFs as one of your file formats. Printing to PDF from 4D is really easy. We can literally just say print to, destination PDF using print form, print selection, things of that nature. So we get to essentially use our existing tool set that we're accustomed to writing reports with versus HTML reports where you would have to do all of the coding by hand. Again, everyone can view them. One thing we have found that's kind of a bad about going with PDFs is we have found that occasionally, especially on Windows, the print to Microsoft Print to PDF, I believe is the setting, that it occasionally generates a corrupt PDF. Because of that, we found that we have to we generate all of our reports on a 4D client, and we actually reboot and reconnect that 4D client nightly to try and help with that. It seems to make a difference. The other problem we found is printing to a PDF driver is that, at least on Windows, I can't speak for the Mac on this, is that you can't generate two reports at the exact same time because it's a queued document. So there's a print queue there, and it essentially makes one at a time. So if you have some real high volume stuff going on with printing, you can run into conflicts where you need a semaphore or something to make sure that your printouts don't collide. One of the things we have found to be extremely helpful for us is the WKHTML to PDF. WKHTML to PDF is a command line tool that lets us take HTML and generate PDF files from that. It's really powerful. One of the things that we've been able to do with it is generate PDFs that include signatures. So we have a sign in, sign out application on iPads and for students, and essentially a class, and you can see we can have a signature, and WKHTML to PDF actually is pulling the signature files that we store in the Amazon cloud real time out of Amazon's S3 cloud and embeds them at render time into the HTML, and then therefore converts them into our PDF. You can script things like adding page numbers at the bottoms of the pages and dates and times, things of that nature. So you can really kind of, if you build it into almost like a platform for your printing, you can get consistent printing results with like page numbers always centered on the bottom, and dates, as you can see, always bottom left, for instance, or bottom right, or wherever. And if you build that into your script for calling these jobs, you get real consistent printouts or conversions from WKHTML to PDF. There are really two ways to use WKHTML to PDF. One is you can actually call it from the command line with launch external process. The other way you can go at this is using a component. Miyako has done great things he's built a really great component, and you can find that one at the website link here below. And with that, let's take a peek at that for a second. I'm going to pull that up. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so this is on Miyako's Git GitHub website, and as you can see, he has it set up so you can pass in a path to a document, and then you essentially pass in an object with all sorts of options. Is it landscape? Is it portrait? What's your DPI? And all sorts of other things. And right here is the main call. You'll see WKHTML to PDF converts the HTML file passed in here with the option set here and outputs a PDF blob to you. It is really slick. He's done a really nice job with it, and it, as usual with Miyako, of course, and it's a really simple to use component. So let's look at a little bit of code that we're using in our sample database to generate reports with WKHTML to PDF. So I'm going to pull up this here. This will give me a quick look. All right, rept invoice. So let's look at the invoice here. Whoop. Rept invoice. All right, so in this case here, we actually, there's a bunch of code included with the sample database here that helps you build HTML reports. There are these RPT base functions is what they are. And for instance, the base head here, whoops, wrong keystroke, opens or creates the HTML header and a bunch of the standard styles, and creates the opening div to put your HTML into. And then you'll see here I have columns of my SKU, my width, or my SKU, excuse me, my width, my SKU, my name, my quantity, price, and unit price. And I'm going to just output this into a table type format, and then I have a wrapper for a title, and that's going to set the fonting and everything for me. And you'll see I'm going to just scroll down here, and we'll be looping through the records here to essentially output table rows and columns into an invoice. Again, all this is in the same. These functions are real simple. Set alternating colors, things like that. So when we run this report, let me grab my browser here, and believe that was customers. I'll click the print button. Oh, no, it's not customers, it's invoices, or orders, sorry. Where's that report? Oh, there it is on the input. Okay, so I'm going to output this to a PDF. And I must have a breakpoint going. Oh, yes, I do. Let's let that go through. Back to the browser over here. Apparently I had a couple breakpoints going. And here is my invoice PDF. One of the interesting things we can do is we can actually set the this same HTML to output as an Excel file. So let's do that as well. apparently something's not quite right there at the moment. Maybe there's a breakpoint hidden away somewhere. I'm not sure. Okay, so there was a breakpoint stuck in the background that caused that to get stopped up. If we look now, open this in Excel, you can see the same invoice is now saved as an Excel file. We're going to circle back in a little bit on how we generated that Excel file from the same HTML output. But I just wanted to point it out now and put it in your mind for use a little bit later, but it is certainly a handy way using that outputting your code, your report, as HTML, and then converting it to either PDF or an Excel file is possible. So, all right. So let's jump and look a little bit at the code. There's actually a report. Whoops, I meant to close that. We have a main report handling method back in the background here that takes all sorts of parameters coming out of a report table. So we have an invoice. You can see for the invoice here, we give it a title, a name, a description, what kind of report it is. So you'll see it's a programmed WKHTMLTOPDF, and here's the method that I call, and my options are execute. So I could do some things like a choice list or a date range that I want to get. If I choose date range, for instance, I'm going to put my dates from the dialog into the variables rpt vd start date and rpt vd end date. But in this case, we're just executing it. For the current record ID from our web page, let me find my browser here. This primary key 10248 is going to come into the variable vnid. VT title is going to come from the report title field here, and we output everything. The table pointer is going to be the execute table right here, and the VX output is the blob variable we always put the final content of the report execution into. Excuse me. Okay, and the report view right here is the view I want to show this at, and I can choose, do I want it to show it in the input view, the output view, both, and all is going to show in all locations that I press the print button. So when you saw me struggling a couple minutes ago going, where in the world is that report? It's because I had this set up to be the input view of orders. So when I press this button, I get my invoice report. Okay, so let's talk now about, let me get my slides going again. Let's talk about Excel files for a couple minutes now. There are some good and bad things to output into Excel files instead of PDF files. One of the things that's really nice about Excel files, XLSX files, is they're compressed. If you're not familiar with that, XLSX files that Microsoft outputs with Excel now are actually just zip files. If you change the file extension from XLSX to .zip, you can open it up and see that an Excel file really is a collection of XML documents and supporting files. One of the reasons we love to output Excel files instead of PDFs is people love them because they can manipulate the data, they can copy it, paste it, move it all around. It's in a columnar format that usually they're really happy with. So it's really kind of a go-to for most of our reports that we generate. One of the problems, however, is making Excel files is a ton of work to make them by hand. To generate all the correct XML files and whatnot. We talked a little bit about one of the other downsides is that not everybody has Excel. So by default, one of the problems is that they may have to go get a program and install it on their machine, like an OpenOffice, or install Excel if they don't have it, or log into a Google Sheets account and open the document that way. So that's one of the downsides, but majority of the people we all work with in a corporate setting are going to have Excel available to them, or numbers, or something that readily opens an Excel file. There's a handful of ways that you can actually build Excel files. There's plugins out there. There's a handful of those. Pluggers has a good plugin for it. I can't remember if there's any other commercial ones. Miyako has a handful of them as well that he has available that are based off of open source projects for generating Excel files. The other way is to actually manually build the Excel files and output them and then zip them up, which can be done natively now with 4D, having the zip commands built right into V18. But again, like I said earlier, building them manually is a ton of work. So let's talk about an Excel component that we've packed up here today. We've actually included in the demo here a component that generates Excel files. Let's get out of this for a moment and fire that up and take a peek at it. Okay, so XLSX component right here is a component that outputs data or Excel files with a couple of commands. There's really only 3 commands that functions that you call from here. One is XLS arrays to Excel. The other is XLSX data to Excel, and the third one is XLS quick report to Excel. And their names are pretty straightforward. This one takes a report object and a bunch of parallel arrays, pointers to parallel arrays, and outputs an Excel spreadsheet for you. Excuse me. The next one is, this one takes a reporting object and either pointers to arrays or fields. And the final one is a converter that we have that you pass in a quick report template and settings object, and it will generate a a Excel file from a quick report. So, and these are all native and do not use any plugins at all to generate quick report files, or Excel files. So let's actually take a quick peek at a report or two that are using these. Okay, so let's look at the arrays one first. We'll get this function rept customer arrays. Rept customer arrays. Okay, so you can see in this function we declare a bunch of arrays, do a selection to array on them, and then populate a settings object, and then call our arrays to Excel function, and it sends back a path to an Excel file for us. Let's talk a little bit about the settings object. We have a title and a subtitle, headers, and the headers are just a semicolon separated list, and the widths are also a semicolon separated list by a number, and you can also do some custom formatting if you want to here, but in this case I'm just going to let it use defaults. So let's jump over and actually run this. I'm going to throw a breakpoint in here just so you can see it go through, and then we'll look at the output with our browser. So let's go here. I believe that was customers. Click customers to Excel arrays. Okay. You can see the breakpoint hit here. We have a bunch of arrays loaded with a handful of records. And then we'll set up our configuration object. We'll run this through. Step over. You'll see there's a path now to an Excel file in the temp directory, and then we convert this to a blob and send it out to the browser. And if I go back over to here, here is my Excel file, my title, my subtitle, my column headers, and the data coming out of the database in a columnar format with just a couple lines of code. And again, all native 4D code, no plugins behind this, and you have a native Excel file. So we love this one. It's super fast, and you can do, you know, there's no threading problems with multiple reports running simultaneously across different processes like you can run into with generating PDFs. Okay, so let's look at the next report. Is actually a let's talk about for a second is we're going to call this one mixed. Or actually, let's do selection. And looks like I lost my method name there in my data. So let's talk about this one. Mixed. Actually, here's the selection one I meant to look at a minute ago. You can see this is the exact same, almost the exact same bit of code, but instead of putting the data into arrays, I just pass pointers to the fields themselves. And let's go run that one, but let's fix the report setup for it first. Wrapped. Wrong one. Wrapped customers selection. Okay, you'll notice here also I'm using my prescript to actually there was a reason I had that in there. Sorry about that. You'll notice I'm using my prescript in this case to generate the report. I don't even have to have a method. I can literally just paste code in here. Same code as this, but I can paste it in right here and run it. So let's talk about the prescript for just a second. Report execute. I'm going to throw that in here and let you take a peek at that. Okay, perfect. I have a debug there already. So this time I'm going to go selection, no method. Okay, so you'll notice this time we have a prescript, and this lets us do all sorts of funky things, like I can make a report and deploy it even without ever even doing a recompile and redeploy my database. So notice I take my prescript here, I wrap it into a 4D code tag, and then I use process tags on that. So notice the script there is all of my code that you saw me paste into that prescript, and I can actually, I'm going to step into that and notice how 4D's process tags works. I can actually step through this now. This was such a great addition 4D gave us a couple versions ago. And there we go. You can see I generate my report. It put it in that document path. Then I stuff it back into my output blob. Remember back over here I told you that whatever is in VX output is what gets served back to the browser. And I will say document to blob, and I will serve that out. And now back over here, I will have a new document without even having a 40 method for this new report called. I just pasted code into that framework prescript, and I outputted a report. So we love this for generating all sorts of reports without ever, real-time updating our live database, and the report definition is stored in the database, and the code for it stored in the database. And it's all native Excel file in that case. Again, no plugins. Now let's talk about one more format of the output to Excel, and that is going to be the mixed mode. Customer mixed. So let's look at that quickly. And in this case, we're doing, again, the same thing, but you'll notice in this case we have arrays and field pointers. In this case, we'll loop through the records for the first record found, this table. We're going to loop through that table's records, and again, these need to be in parallel, otherwise you'll run into problems. But I can do mixed mode, so I could maybe do some formatting on some data, stuff it into an array, and then throw it into my report without ever having to and then just pass it off as a column to my report, but only do certain columns that I need to do pre-formatting on rather than all. So again, let's jump over here to my browser. Let's print this, and this is the mixed mode. Got my Excel file, and now you'll see it's pretty much the same as the last several reports we've been doing, but it is using arrays and fields in the same report. So that little component we threw in here generates a ton of reports for us in so many different ways. Let's talk about the final function of that report component is generating quick reports and outputting them to Excel files. So in this case, I have a quick report defined. I'm going to download it. There's a blob field in our report definition here, and I'm going to download this, and let's go orders.4QR, save. Now I'm going to open this up. What was that? Orders, okay. Tables, orders, quick report, open, orders. Okay, so let's remove a column. Let's remove the postal code here. Delete this column, save it, and alright, so now on my report definition, I'm going to upload a new quick report template. Upload orders, save that. So now you'll see I can jump to my browser over here. Let's go to orders, print, orders quick report. Apparently there's something not quite right in my setup here, so let's do this. All records, orders. And there is my quick report. Converted, actually this one went to a PDF. Let's fix that. Oh, I had it set as PDF here. So in this case, I want it to be Excel. Save. Let's go back over here. Print, quick report, open. Perhaps my record's locked there. Must be. Let's just close the database quick. Looks like I have too many of these windows open. It's part of my problem here. Let's try that again. There we go. Now it's saved as Excel. So let's jump back over here, hit that, and say Quick Report. And this now took a Quick Report template and generated out a Excel document from the Quick Report template. And you probably caught me there that we also can generate this as a PDF. Oh, PDF instead. So I can control to the users, do they want a PDF or a Excel file. So let's just make sure that's saved. Okay, it did. So back over here, let's print this again. This time I'll get a PDF output. And what happens in this case is the Quick Report goes through the Quick Report template engine, generates an HTML file. The HTML file is then run through WKHTMLTOPDF to generate the PDF file. The Excel file uses the Quick Report engine, generates an XML file out of the Quick Report templating, and then that Excel file gets packaged up into a proper Excel document, zipped up with a bunch of bits and pieces that are needed for that. So the other thing we can do here is I can say both instead of PDF or Excel. So now as a user, I can choose, well, what am I, well, let's try that again. Maybe it didn't save that. There we go. Now I can choose, do I want a PDF or do I want an Excel output, and the report engine will properly deliver which output I'd like to see. So you saw I chose Excel. Here's my Excel file. Okay, so one of the things we should probably look at for just a minute here is back in that component I was telling you about, this Excel component, how we're doing this. We're cheating a little bit in that in the resource folder, we actually have a couple of predefined XML files ready to go. And we use these XML files to, let's format these so we can see them better. Plugins, XML, with line breaks. Okay, so these are some standard Excel documents that we've extracted out of an Excel document and include them into what we need for building an Excel file. So instead of generating these by hand every time, our component grabs these two files and uses them to package up an Excel file. So let's talk about Excel one more time for just a minute, because I think it's important to understand Excel. That Excel is literally just zip files. So I'm going to say new test. Let's actually go file, save as, test, desktop, test. Okay, test 1, 2, 3, save. And let's look at that really quick here. Go to my desktop. If I change this file here to zip, oh, I still have it open, so close that. Try again. You'll notice this is just a set of files and folders zipped up, and a worksheet is quite literally just a text document, an Excel document. And let's look at what that might look like. So you can see, here's my worksheet. Cell A1, cell B1 are just values. You can see my 1, 2, 3, and this is actually just saying there's a reference to a text string in another document. But you can see that Excel files are quite literally just groupings of XML documents zipped up. And that's all we're doing back here in our component, is using the quick report engine. That's not the folder. Let me pick that again. Using the quick report engine back in here to output an XML file. So let's look at that for a second. So we have a method that builds the folder structure here, copies over a few things, creates our sheet1.xml, and then we use get column info to recurse through the columns of the report, set some standard field widths and whatnot, and we just output XML here using all the wonderful quick report commands we have. And so took a little time to get this working right, but we essentially assign column headings. The 40 column here outputs the data and a bunch of other crazy things. We did have to do a little bit of cleanup, because if you end up putting let's say HTML in your Excel file, or exists in your fields that you're outputting to Excel, it can cause problems, some of those tags. So we actually strip out a handful of things that we know will cause our files to report as corrupted. So that's how we're generating the Excel files from a quick report, is really this method right here. And please feel free to dig through it and see what it does, and feel free to tweak it, make it better, make it work for you. Let's see here. Let's jump over. One of the things that we've talked a bit about is the report framework. You'll notice, like we talked about, there's a table behind this. I just want to make sure we cover it all. We covered the prescript. The postscript here would actually be used for if I want to clear out a selection of records or something along those lines. I can do that. The other thing I recommend you do, that's not in this database, I realized it far too late, unfortunately, after I turned it over to 4D, is that in our live database we actually have an active-inactive flag on reports. So we can actually deploy a report if someone has a problem with it, or if we are just testing it, we actually set a flag for active and inactive. So if we can immediately pull a report down if there's anything going on with it. Also, we can push up reports in real time without having to do a database update. So we highly recommend adding an active and inactive flag. Kind of one final goodie I talked about early on in this discussion was the how we did the invoice as a PDF and an Excel file. That one is a little bit of a unique one in that the output is HTML to begin with. We then have another component that we've included along here. Let me show you that one. This one is called HTML to Excel. And this one was, completely honest with you, stolen parts and pieces from an old Excel component that Miyako wrote years ago that uses automation scripts to drive Excel. So what we do on that invoice example is we actually save the file as HTML, and then in the background we run a script that, let's see which is the script, save as XLSX. We run a script that essentially opens the HTML document in Excel and does a save as XLSX to make it an Excel file. There's a couple of problems with this in that you need to have Excel installed on your machine that is generating the report because it needs Excel to actually run the conversion from HTML to Excel. So you probably don't actually run Excel installed on your server. But if you have like a workstation that does report generation like we're using, you would put Excel on the workstation and then allow that conversion to happen through the Excel being driven. One of the other problems with this method, although really powerful, is that you can't do multiple conversions simultaneously with Excel, so you need to create or set a semaphore that says, hey, I'm converting a document now, and when the document is done converting, release the semaphore so the next document can convert. It happens pretty quickly. It takes maybe a second or less to convert the document usually, but nonetheless you still need a semaphore to prevent conflicts and essentially your document not being converted and things timing out and crashing. If you look at this, what this really does is it runs either an Apple script over here to open the document, save as, close the document, or a VB script out of the resources folder which does the same things, opens a document. Let's look at these real quick. So open does a quick shell script or VB script to call Excel, open the document silently, and then you do a save as silently and you close the workbook silently. So pretty straightforward stuff, but it's a goodie that we use, just a little goodie component we use to convert HTML documents to Excel as well, so we can do things like that invoice. So let's jump back to that for 1 second and just re-show that one last time. So that is here. Let's go into here, print, invoice, and again, this is this function here, invoice to Excel, that drives Excel to, you can see it's still fairly fast generating that and doing the conversion, but this document was originally sourced as an HTML document and is now delivered as an Excel document. So that is kind of the final goodie I wanted to make sure we covered, and I hope that you all find something helpful and useful out of this, and I hope that you can take these components especially and put them to work for you. Thank you all and have a great day.